We have multiple Rams updates to talk about on today's episode of the Rams Digest, like a huge what-if scenario that would really change the entire trajectory of this offseason. We're also going to discuss, in such an uncertain offseason, one thing that is for sure that the Rams have on their roster moving forward. And we're also going to talk about a couple of mock drafts and what the first round is kind of looking like in terms of what the Rams may be targeting. I don't know if it's the experts or the insiders kind of knowing this about the Rams, but there is a little bit of a trend in terms of their first-round picks. But we'll discuss multiple first-round pick options, all on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Josh. If you don't remember, if you guys are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and press that subscribe button now, as 79.3% of you guys are still not subscribed to the channel. You're watching the videos, but you're not subscribed. We appreciate that the number has dropped to under 80%, but still, we want to make sure everyone here is subscribed so you don't miss any daily Rams content here at the Rams Digest. Let's get into this first story here. A huge what-if scenario. Now, I don't know if you guys are tired of this conversation being had, but all week long last week, I was kind of discussing the possibility of moving on from Kupp and Matthew Stafford. And last episode, I really broke down Matthew Stafford specifically and the potential of trading Matthew Stafford. Now, that's an interesting scenario, but it doesn't really kind of rubs you the wrong way, right? I think as a Rams fan, again, we know how legendary Matthew Stafford is to his franchise now moving forward, forever in Rams history, right? But at the same time, there is a scenario, a big what-if scenario that could possibly happen. I don't anticipate it happening, but it could happen, right? Where will the Rams turn at quarterback if Matthew Stafford retires, right? We've been talking about the Rams trading him, or that possibility of the Rams trading him, and it's like, it doesn't really sound right. That's probably not realistic, not going to happen, right? But at the same time, what if Stafford takes that opportunity for the Rams that they have in their hand right now? They can kind of choose what they want to do with him, right? Technically, what if he takes that away from them and he just retires? He just calls it a career, right? After 30 minutes after his last game, he talked about, the game just ended, so I haven't really thought about my future. I think I still got some game left in me. But what if that changes? A month goes by, right? He does have a few children, right? A few daughters. I know he likes, his wife is podcasting and doing media and things like that. And so maybe he jumps into media, gets some kind of offers like that. All that kind of interesting stuff that could really factor into what Matthew Stafford decides to do in his future. I do think he's a good quarterback. I do think he still has game left in him. But again, there's a real possibility that you say it's a slim chance, but there's a real possibility that he just retires. He's 37 years old. He's not a young player anymore. So in the scenario that Matthew Stafford retires, let's look at free agency first, right? In free agency, there is interesting names. The best of which, it seems like, the guy, the player who would probably get the most money on this market right now is actually Sam Darnold. He's only 27 years old, probably going to be 28 by the time next season starts. Obviously we saw what he did in Minnesota, and many people kind of enjoyed seeing him blossom. He's a quarterback who played for USC, right? So familiar to the area a little bit. So that would be an interesting route for the Rams to take. I think when you're looking at Stafford and Sam Darnold, in terms of the generally speaking, their style of play at this point, pocket passing quarterback, not very mobile, can throw the ball down the field a little bit, but obviously we were talking about Sam Darnold, maybe not as skilled as Matthew Stafford at this point in his career, has not shown to be as great as Matthew Stafford has been in his entire career, right? Stafford's a legendary quarterback at this point in his career, and so Sam Darnold isn't Matthew Stafford's level, but say again, Matthew Stafford retires this year. What are you going to do at quarterback? What puts you in the best case scenario, right? Do you want to go after a guy going down the list, a Jacoby Brissett? Do you want to pick up a Marcus Mariota? Do you want to pick up a Drew Lock and see what that route takes you? Or is it paying a little bit of money to sign Sam Darnold and kind of keep the team in a similar play style to what you're already doing now and seeing where that takes you? That's kind of an interesting route for the Rams to take because, we're talking about maybe Sam Darnold's leadership, things like that. It's kind of, Sean McVay can kind of take care of that for the most part. He's going to get his team ready to go, not to take anything away from what Stafford does as a leader, but, there is a lot of leadership in the room already, right? Sam Darnold, maybe you're not looking for that from him too much. And also, Minnesota did kind of get behind Sam Darnold, so obviously he did something right in that locker room. So overall, that's an interesting route to take. I think if we're talking about trying to win next season immediately and you need a quarterback because Stafford retires, then Sam Darnold might be your best option, right? Trey Lance hasn't done it. Zach Wilson probably not. Maybe he's an option for you, but probably not going to succeed immediately, or at least doesn't give you the best chance from what he's done so far in his career. Taylor Heineke, not really. Marcus Mariota, kind of end of his career as well. Drew Lock, same thing, right? So none of these guys really kind of intrigue me personally, right? I think one name that I find interesting if you want to switch things up, Sean McVay's been talking in the offseason about what he wants to do moving forward for the Rams on offense, and he did talk about some versatility. Now, if we're talking about changing up the offense and the style of play, I like Justin Fields. Maybe you pair Justin Fields with a Trey Lance as a backup kind of combo situation. Yes, I know it's not ideal and it's not the prettiest of names, but Justin Fields, to be fair, did win some games in Chicago, did do some good things in a very crappy situation, if we're being honest. And so, Fields, I don't really hate that route. Looking at Fields with the Trey Lance combo, just to have this similar style of play quarterback as a starter and as a backup, that'd be an interesting route for the Rams to take. A very unique, not necessarily guaranteeing you're going to win now, but a unique difference in terms of play style and versatility on offense that Stafford and Sam Darnold, guys like that, don't bring to the table necessarily. So, if it's not Sam Darnold, I kind of like switching it up altogether and going after a Justin Fields. Maybe you don't pair him with Trey Lance, but a Justin Fields with a mobile type backup quarterback to kind of keep that offensive play style, whether it's a starter or the backup. It's kind of the interesting route I think the Rams could take. Moving forward from that, if you can't get a quarterback or those quarterbacks don't really excite you too much, Matthew Stafford retires. Let's look at the trade market. This article does mention, shout out to Cameron DeSilva for this, but you don't really expect Dak Prescott to be traded. That would be kind of the one name. I know not many people are Cowboys fans or fans of Dak Prescott, but he's a good quarterback in the NFL. I mean, all things considered, we just talked about Sam Darnold and Justin Fields being your quarterback. I think everyone can at least agree that Dak Prescott would be a better option than that. But you don't really expect Dak to get traded. I think he also just kind of has the contract extended, so I don't think the Cowboys would even think about trading Dak Prescott. But personally, a couple years ago, thinking about the Matthew Stafford Rams situation, I did think Dak Prescott was an interesting name if you want to win now with a good quarterback, right? That's a potential name you can look at. I just don't think it's possible. I don't think it's really the price the Rams would want to pay for a quarterback, right? I know many Rams fans don't really believe in what Dak Prescott has done in Dallas, and so overall, it just wouldn't really work, I don't think, right, ultimately. So I don't think that's a route, but that's an interesting name to maybe you call the Cowboys about. Bryce Young, you don't really expect Bryce Young to be traded, even especially after he kind of shined a little bit toward the end of this season. Geno Smith, you're kind of in the same boat, right? A guy who's getting toward the end of his career. Yes, he still has some game left in him. Maybe I wouldn't even say he's better than Matthew Stafford now. Not that you have to compare them because if Matthew Stafford retires, and who cares? But Geno Smith, maybe, all right, to get a quarterback who's a stable guy in there, who has the experience, who can make some plays for you. That's an interesting name. I don't know how many Rams fans are fans of Geno Smith, but okay, I can see that being an opportunity. But ultimately, if you go after a guy like Anthony Richardson, someone that the Colts have kind of really invested in, another name they have here in the article, those are intriguing names in the trade market, but even then, they're not necessarily on the market. That'd be you calling these teams and seeing if they're interested, right? And I don't know how interested any of these teams would be in moving their quarterback. I don't know how interested the Rams fans would be in trading a bunch of picks for any of these guys, right? Anthony Richardson, Dak Prescott, even Bryce Young would probably still garner some solid picks. I think Geno Smith would be the only quarterback you could trade for maybe a second, third round pick, maybe. And even then, Seattle fans who are watching this may be laughing at me for even saying that. That may not be the reality. I think that's what I would want, but that may not even be the reality. You may have to give up a first-round pick minimum for any of these quarterbacks, and I don't think that's really super, super ideal. Moving on to the next routes, right? Again, Stafford retired. We're still talking about this hypothetical. Internally, what do the Rams have? Well, Jimmy G, we just saw what he did last year. Not really the best. He only had one game, to be fair, but not really the best, not really the worst of options, but he is an older quarterback. Got to that point in his career now where he's backing up guys like Matthew Stafford. Stetson Bennett has shown flashes, but I'm not confident enough to start him right now. You look at the article you're mentioning, Bennett has yet to play an NFL snap, and in the preseason, looked a little bit overwhelmed, right? Yeah, he hasn't really done that much. He's shown a couple nice throws, but I think he threw a bunch of interceptions, right? That one game he did have in the preseason. So that's not really ideal for the Rams, and Garoppolo is also a free agent. So those are the internal options for the Rams. I don't think that's ideal. I don't think those are realistic. I don't think it's possible for those guys to be the quarterbacks. Then we're looking at cut candidates, right? This article also brings those up. Aaron Rodgers maybe gets cut from the Jets. Kirk Cousins maybe gets cut from Atlanta now that they have Michael Penix. Derek Carr maybe cut to save some cap space in New Orleans. I don't know if any 3 of those names intrigue Rams fans. I think for me personally, the one that I think, is one, realistic to be cut, and two, close-ish to what Stafford does on the field. I guess it'd be Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins kind of, but Aaron Rodgers obviously does similar stuff to Stafford as well. But all three, again, older guys toward the end of their career. You are putting a guy who's basically what in Stafford's position, but none of those three guys have been playing as well as Matthew Stafford has been this last couple of seasons. And so, again, another downgrade scenario. We're realizing there aren't that many positive options if Stafford decides to retire. It's kind of getting scary, actually, right? So, not necessarily the greatest of situations right now. So, that's kind of where we're at, right? Those are the different options for the Rams. And I think that's why we discussed, right? If the Rams did want to trade Matthew Stafford, would they really have someone better than Stafford to take his place? Here's one thing I didn't mention last episode that I kind of, after watching the video, I was realizing what I didn't mention. What if, just hypothetically, the Rams don't want to win next year, right? And it's not to say that they don't want to win. Of course, Snead and again, Sean McVay, they're going to want to win. But what if they understand and accept the reality that if Matthew Stafford retires, for example, we're still talking about that hypothetical, what if they understand the reality that you're not going to get someone better than Stafford? We know that, right? Even if he doesn't retire and you trade him, we know we're not going to get a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford next year. That's not why we're talking about trading him. We're talking about trading him because we're not going to win next year, even with Matthew Stafford. What if that's the thought process? Again, I'm not saying that's what we're going to do. I'm not saying that's how I feel about the Rams. I'm not saying that's how Rams fans should feel. I'm just simply saying, what if the conversation is, even if Stafford is back, even if we renegotiate Cooper Kupp and figure out how to get his money down and we have these guys return, are we really going to win a Super Bowl next year? I'm not saying that that's what we should feel. I'm not saying that's what I feel. I'm simply saying, what if that's the conversation being had in the Rams front office? Yes, they were close, but they gave it their all, and they still fell short. And so maybe you can say, well, you didn't give it your all because you could spend a little bit more money and get some guys on defense and get some guys on offense, and we can actually make this team a real Super Bowl contender. But what if that's not what Snead believes, right? And if that's not what he believes, then it would not be worth it for him to go out and invest in all this money and invest, again, like they did back in 2021, to get whatever you can to really go all out and be in a bad cap scenario for a couple years after, to go all in for a Super Bowl next year. What if he goes, well, you have Kobe Turner, who's on his second year of his contract. You have Jared Verse. You have Braden Fisk. You have Byron Young, Cam Kitchens. All these guys are so young and on their rookie deals. You have a window now of 4 years, 3 to 4 years. Why are we going to ruin that window to go all in, hoping we can win a Super Bowl when Les Snead, GM, and other people in the room don't actually believe they could, even if they went all in with Stafford and Kupp? So that's kind of where the trade conversation takes place. And that's kind of where, if Matthew Stafford retires, that's kind of where the conversation goes. And I think that's why it's very complex right now where the Rams are. It depends on what Les Snead and the people in that building believe. If they believe they can compete next year, then sure, they're going to go all in. They should probably go all in. But if Matthew Stafford retires, or again, you don't believe you can go all in, or if you go all in, you're going to win. And what if you don't even want to win next year, right? You don't expect to win next year, so you don't go all in. That's kind of where the conversation gets a little bit, it muddies the water. So that's kind of where it's at. Again, that's the situation. Again, a scenario where Stafford does take it out of the Rams' hands and retires, and that's going to be kind of rough. The options are very slim, and that's why. Why would you go all in and go get Kirk Cousins? Why would you go all in and spend a bunch of money on Derek Carr? Why would you go spend a bunch of money on Sam Darnold? If you don't think you're going to win with those guys, maybe the Rams start being patient. Being patient. If Stafford does retire, you be patient. You just try to draft a good quarterback. Try to sign a young quarterback, Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, or whatever, Zach Wilson, to see if you can develop a quarterback to become your next guy. That's kind of where we're gonna have to see where the Rams decide to go. And this is an interesting hypothetical to dive into if Stafford retires, right? Because then there's not an option for the Rams. If that is the case, I think the Rams would probably go a little bit slower and wouldn't go all in on a Kirk Cousins because, Stafford retires, the options aren't great. So let's just be patient about finding our next quarterback. Moving on to the next story here. Actually, before I almost pulled up this is freaking out for a second. I wanted to pull this up first. One guarantee with the Rams, a very, again, uncertain offseason, right? We're talking about so many different routes that can be taken, right? Stafford retires. Cooper Kupp wants to leave. They trade Matthew Stafford. A lot of different routes the Rams can go down. A lot of weird uncertainty around what the Rams have. But the one thing they do have, one thing we can guarantee the Rams have, it's one guarantee that we are not worried about. Here it is. Puka Nacua is a dog. That's really what the one guarantee. Puka Nacua, from weeks 8 to 17, half of the season essentially, these are Puka Nacua's numbers. 955 receiving yards, second in the NFL. 501 yards after catch. That's 501 yak yards. Or, I don't even call them yak yards, but yak, right? First in the NFL in yak. 46 receiving touchdowns. First downs. I'm sorry. I was like, wait, hold on. Receiving touchdowns. Hold on, give me a second. For receiving first downs. Tied for first in the NFL. And then 75 receptions, second in the NFL. Essentially a top 2 receiver for Puka Nacua to end the second half of the year. Shout out to Puka Nacua. That's one guarantee the Rams have. And here, just to put this in perspective, right? For the full season, let's see his full season stats. This is half the year. Week 8 to week 17, about half the year. About 9 weeks. You take a look at the first half of the season. He only played a couple more games, so you pull up his full stats here, and this is what it looked like. Out of the last 9 weeks, Puka had 955 yards. The first half of the season, he had 1,000. Or with the first half of the season, he had 1,000. So just goes to show, right? Just half of the year. If he had played a full season, we're looking at Puka Nacua likely going over 1,400 yards again pretty easily. Maybe even getting close to that 1,600 to 700 yards in the year. So shout out to Puka Nacua. That's one guarantee the Rams have. One thing moving forward that's pretty awesome with the Rams. They have a beast, stud, superstar in the making on defense in Jared Verse, and a superstar stud receiver in Puka Nacua, who will be here hopefully for a long time for the Rams to compete with moving forward. So I just kind of want to bring that up. Shout out to Puka Nacua. He's a monster. That's kind of where we're at from here. I do have, NFL mock draft time, mock draft Monday, if you will, but we are about 17 minutes into this video. So I'm going to really quickly bring up one name, and then what we'll do is next episode, I'll give a full mock draft breakdown of maybe some multiple mock draft options. But one name I did want to bring up here on today's episode, we'll just bring up the first one. I'm hoping it's someone that's interesting. Okay, sure, it's an interesting one. It is, this was, I think, a mock draft that I picked up from 7-round mock draft from Rams Wire. This is from Cam De Silva as well. He broke down a possibility of this 7-round mock draft, and the first round pick was tight end Colston Loveland out of Michigan. So, interesting name for sure, and that's an interesting conversation to have, right? The Rams, are they looking for a new tight end? You look at Tyler Higbee and what he did toward the end of the year. It was great. It was awesome, but again, going back to Stafford and Cooper Kupp, these guys are getting older, right? And Tyler Higbee wasn't there all year long, and that's kind of an issue. Even though he did look like a monster and he looked incredible, and we were super happy to have him back, played really well, dealt with an injury after his first playoff game, right? And so can you survive another season of half of a season of Tyler Higbee? Not saying that's guaranteed it's going to happen, but that's kind of what's been happening lately. It's been what's trending. So if you want to make sure you have a more consistent play at the tight end position, a more consistent future tight end stud for you, hopefully for many seasons to come, maybe this is an option for you. Rams in a mock draft take tight end Colston Loveland out of Michigan. And we'll do in the next episode, what we'll do is we'll actually break down the player. So I'll do a few different first round draft pick options from different insiders and different experts. We'll do maybe 4 or 5 different experts, and we'll break down those players, and we'll see if there's a trend in terms of what the Rams may be looking at that first round pick this season. That's going to do it for me on today's episode of the Rams Digest. You guys, give me a comment down below what you guys think about the whole Matthew Stafford situation. Are you scared if he does retire? Do you think if he retires, the Rams have a possibility to compete? Should they compete? Should they go all in? What do you guys think the Rams should do this offseason? Let me know at least one thing you think the Rams should do or need to do this offseason. That's going to do it for me on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Joshua Giron, and I'm out.